The storm had begun the moment the nurse whispered the words no mother ever wants to hear, and it felt as if the entire world had tilted into darkness. The hospital lights flickered like trembling candles, the rain hammered against the windows, and the tiny monitors beside the infant's bed blinked in uneven rhythms that seemed to echo the panic in her chest. A young mother stood frozen, her hands pressed against the glass of the neonatal unit as her fragile newborn fought for each breath. She felt as if every heartbeat in her own body was tied to the rise and fall of that tiny chest. She wondered if hope could survive inside a place filled with the scent of antiseptic and the sound of alarms that threatened to slice through the thin threads of her courage. And then, when her tears finally broke free, something happened that she never expected. Her baby, barely alive, opened his eyes for a moment that seemed borrowed from heaven and tried to reach toward her. It was the smallest movement, hardly visible, yet powerful enough to shift the universe inside her. If you believe in kindness, miracles, and the power of second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. It truly helps stories like this reach others who might need hope today. Her name was Amina, and she had entered motherhood already carrying a patchwork of fears stitched from the past. She worked long shifts in a garment factory where the air always tasted of dust, living in a tiny rented room where she could hear the city's chaos breathing through the cracked walls. Her life had never been the gentle kind. She had grown used to stretching every coin, skipping meals, and quieting her own dreams so her unborn child could have a better beginning. Throughout the pregnancy, she had whispered promises to the life inside her, imagining soft sunlight, warm mornings, and lullabies carried on the breeze. But reality has a way of arriving without an invitation. Complications rose like shadows she could not outrun, and her son, Ilyas, arrived too soon, too small, and too fragile for the world outside. The hospital corridors became her second home. Nights blurred into mornings as she sat beside the incubator, watching her baby tangled in tubes and wires that made him look more like a wounded bird than a newborn child. She felt helpless, as if her soul were made of cracked porcelain trying to hold back an ocean. Doctors walked by with measured expressions, their words carefully chosen, their eyes carrying the weight of truths they did not want to speak. They said he was fighting, but they also said he might be tired. Amina kept imagining a door between life and death, and her baby standing on the threshold with a wind pulling at him from both sides. Every moment became a lesson in fear. She learned how to listen to the rhythm of machines, how to read the changing tones of alarms, how to hold her breath whenever a nurse rushed across the room. Sometimes she felt the entire future trembling in her hands. She prayed in the half-darkness, whispered every hope she had ever known, and clung to the memory of that small movement he had made when he tried to reach for her. She replayed it inside her mind like a lifeline. It reminded her that he had not come into the world to disappear quietly. As days passed, Amina began to unravel under the weight of exhaustion and despair. The world outside kept moving, unaware of the war she was fighting. Bills piled up. Her landlord knocked on her door with impatience in his footsteps, and her job threatened to replace her if she did not return soon. She felt caught between two cages. One held the life she had to maintain to survive, and the other held her baby, a fragile miracle she could not leave. She felt guilt in every direction. When she stayed in the hospital, she imagined her home collapsing without her. When she went home to gather a few belongings, she imagined her baby reaching for her and not finding her there. On the 10th night, the doctor gently informed her that the situation had turned critical. Ilyas was not responding well to treatment, and his tiny lungs seemed to be losing the fight. Amina felt the walls tilt. She pressed her forehead to the incubator, letting her tears fall in slow, burning drops. She whispered apologies to him in her heart for the world he had been born into, for the unfairness, for the pain, for everything she could not fix. She wanted to give him strength, but she felt she did not have any left inside herself. And then something indescribable happened. The night grew still. Even the rain softened. The monitors, which had been beeping irregularly, suddenly aligned in a gentle pattern. The air felt different, as if someone unseen had entered the room with a quiet presence that softened the edges of suffering. Amina lifted her head when she felt a faint warmth touch her cheek. She thought she was imagining things until she saw her baby look up at her. His eyes, barely open before, were gazing directly into hers. And then, though his lips barely moved, she felt a message carried inside her own heart. She felt it rather than heard it, a delicate whisper, like a feather brushing the soul. "Do not cry, Mummy." She did not understand how, but the message did not feel like an illusion. It felt like a voice shaped from love itself. It felt like something beyond the material world, and she sensed another presence behind it, subtle and comforting, like a guardian leaning in to listen. She felt, with every fiber of intuition, that an angel had heard her sorrow and had chosen to stand beside her child that night. Strength poured into her limbs like warm light returning to a frozen body. She placed her hand on the glass and felt her heartbeat steadying. She promised him silently that she would not give up, no matter how dark the path became. If he was fighting, then she would become the armor around him. If he was reaching for life, then she would be the force that pushed back against despair. The warmth in the room lingered, as if approving. From that moment, something inside Amina changed. Hope began to breathe again, slow and timid at first, but undeniably alive. She went home with renewed purpose, collected her belongings, and made arrangements with her aunt to help cover a few days of rent. She swallowed her pride and asked her factory supervisor for a temporary unpaid leave, telling him she would return stronger than before. She began spending more time reading about premature babies, about tiny victories, about mothers who had walked similar roads and made it through. She soaked her mind in hope like a cloth absorbing rain. In the days that followed, she noticed subtle improvements. Ilyas began responding slightly better to treatment. His oxygen levels fluctuated less. Nurses who had once looked at his chart with worry began sharing cautious smiles. Amina wondered if faith had found a way to loop itself into reality. Every morning the room felt a little brighter, even when the weather outside was bleak. She kept imagining the angel she had sensed that night watching over her son, guarding him with a patience that belonged to eternity. Weeks passed, and each one carried a new milestone. The tubes were gradually reduced. The incubator temperature was adjusted. Her baby's tiny fingers grew stronger, curling around her pinky during the few moments she was allowed skin contact. She remembered how frail he had looked in the beginning, and now she watched him flinch when bright lights passed over him. A sign that he was becoming more aware of the world trying to welcome him. Hope did not arrive all at once. It came in fragments. One day, a nurse mentioned that his lungs were responding better than expected. Another day, a doctor congratulated her quietly for her persistence, saying that babies often feel the presence of a mother more deeply than people realize. Amina felt gratitude swell inside her like a sunrise after a long night. Months later, when they finally placed Ilyas in her arms without the barrier of glass, she felt as if the world had been rebuilt around her. His small body against her chest felt like the answer to every unanswered prayer she had whispered in the darkness. His breathing was soft, steady, alive. She closed her eyes and felt tears rise again, but these were different. These carried the shimmering taste of relief. She remembered that night when he told her not to cry, and she felt the warmth of that angelic presence once more. Amina took him home on a day when the sky looked as if it had been washed clean. She wrapped him in a soft blanket she had saved for months, carried him through the narrow streets of her neighborhood, and felt her heart expanding in ways she had never believed possible. Her small rented room no longer felt like a cage. It felt like a sanctuary where a miracle could finally rest. Life did not magically become easy. She still had bills to manage, long shifts to endure, and new responsibilities to juggle. But she carried a strength inside her now that could not be shaken. Whenever fatigue clawed at her edges or the future seemed uncertain, she remembered the warmth in that hospital room, the whisper that reached through a fragile heartbeat, and the invisible guardian she believed had listened. If this story has touched your heart today, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps more people discover stories that offer hope when they need it most. Before we close, please comment your thoughts and let us know if you believe that love can call miracles into the world. Amina would often hold her son in the late evenings when the city had quieted, watching him sleep as though the night itself was protecting him. She felt as if every breath he took was a gentle reminder that sometimes the world listens, sometimes unseen forces cradle the fallen, and sometimes a whisper from a tiny soul can guide a mother back from the edge. She carried that truth forward with her, believing that her son's first message to her had come not only from his own fragile lips but also from the realm where hope is born. And every time she looked into his growing eyes, she felt that invisible angel lingering nearby, steady and patient, ensuring that the promise of that night would never fade.